My name is Rodney Warner. I'm a freelance commercial writer, and this is my presentation on how to write more effectively. This was originally a presentation for the Newtown Business Association Coaches on Couches with Coffee series on August 7th. I wasn't really happy with how it turned out, so this is my do-over. As I said, I'm a freelance commercial writer. I write mostly website content for law firms. I've written many different pieces for many different companies and organizations. I'm also the host of the NBA's Business School podcast, and I'm one of the three bald guys who are talking marketing on that podcast. And if you want to learn more, you can check out my website at rodneywarner.net. I'm assuming that you're writing for a business purpose, not something personal, though no matter how you're writing, keeping it simple is better than making it long and complicated. You want to break things up. You want to shorten things up. If you have long sentences, see if you can make 2 or 3 sentences out of them. Make it a active tense verb. That would be good too. If it's a sales prospect, depending on where the person is in the sales funnel. Once again, keeping it short and simple. The farther they are away from committing to a sale, you want to write something more emotional and try to get their heart into the message. And when they're closer in, you want to focus more on the details so you can finish up the sale. You probably were taught to write in short sentences with active tense verbs in school. And as you got older and your education became more advanced, you probably lost that focus. Maybe you were in college or grad school and you had these horrendous essays to write, all these papers to write, pages you needed to fill. So that kind of lost the focus. So we need to reach back to the beginning, make things simple, make things short, because that will work better. Whatever it is you're writing, there's a good chance the entire piece will not be read, especially if it's for business purposes. You might just have the person scan your material, so you have to write that with scanning in mind. Once again, short, sweet, shorten up your message, use bullet points, use numbered lists. You could bold or italicize important words or phrases to really get somebody's attention because they're not paying really close attention to what you're writing. So that's something we all need to deal with when we're writing stuff. Focusing on the reader and not yourself is really a key important aspect of copywriting, and I think writing in general, because essentially the person you're writing to probably doesn't care what you think or feel. They're really more concerned about what they think and feel, what their problems are, and how they can be solved. And you need to be empathetic to the reader to make them open to your message. You need to focus on the reader's problems, the issues, maybe the opportunities that are before them that you might help them exploit. Part of that is getting the person's attention with a sexy lead paragraph or headline. You want to draw them into the material and write about the benefits of what you're selling, what you want to talk about, what you want to discuss, and how that can help the reader in some way. The problem I see in some writing, especially of the lawyers that I work with, is that they seem to want to impress people with the complexity of their vocabulary, which doesn't do your message any good, depending on who your audience is. If you're writing to a general audience, the level that you're writing to should be simpler and more easy to understand. On the other hand, if your reader is more educated, has more experience, then you have to write to that level. Maybe you could add some more jargon, add some more complexity. But if it's a general piece that you're writing for a general audience, you really need to scale things back and avoid complexity, avoid jargon, avoid complex language. One of the techniques I like to use is asking questions. If you know the person, if you know their values, their priorities, the issues they're trying to solve, you can create questions so the person agrees with you. Now, we all have a psychological need to act, think, and say things that are consistent with our beliefs and with our worldview. You want the person to think yes for him or her to be more open to your proposal. So, given what you're selling, given the benefits of your product or your service, you can phrase those benefits in a question in a way that the obvious answer is yes. You're essentially trying to force the reader to say yes and be more receptive to what you're proposing. In an earlier presentation, I talked about using psychology when you're writing material to make it more effective. So this is kind of a rehash. Social proof is a technique that can be very effective in getting people to yes. You discuss how others are happy with your product or services. The potential buyer will be more open to a purchase if they know that others have tried it and they're happy with it. So they'll assume that what you're proposing is a good idea. Scarcity, talking about scarcity, you don't have many of these products left. You don't have much time to give. So you need to decide now. You need to talk to me now. And this adds urgency to your message. And the person would be more likely to act and contact you and move the proposal forward. Kind of related is a fear of loss. We are generally wired to fear losses more than we are to want a gain. So if you can phrase your message in a way that if they don't act, that they will lose something, as opposed to writing in a way that says, if you do act, you will gain something. So stressing a possible loss might be more effective in getting your reader to take an action. Reciprocity is the concept that we hate to be indebted to another person. So if you can write about how you helped the reader some way in the past, and you're essentially asking for the favor to be returned, that could also help. People like to spend time and talk to people who they think are likable. So if you're likable, the other person is probably more likely to do what you say and spend time with you and talk to you. And also, very important is authority. We're more likely to believe and trust people we believe are in a position of authority. So if you can talk about your expertise, how much you know something, how skilled you are, if you can have the reader perceive you as an authority in your field, they're more likely to trust you and contact you. And trust is a critical thing when you're trying to sell something. You may find yourself falling into a trap of writing the same words, maybe the same phrases over and over again. To avoid that, when you look at your piece, look at the words that you might be using repeatedly and use the thesaurus function in Word to add some variety. It'll spice up the piece. It might generate more interest. People are going to be less bored with what you're writing and more likely to pay attention. You could write a terrific piece, but if it's not physically easy to read, you're probably going to miss your audience. So you want a typeface and a size of the typeface big enough and simple enough to easily read. The color scheme has to be right so the letters aren't blending into the background. You need to space paragraphs apart. White space is your friend. When you look at the piece, is there enough white space? Think about someone reading this. Is it going to be easy for them to read? Again, bullet points and lists can also work very well with this. But again, you've got this fabulous piece that you've written, but if it's difficult to read, you're basically wasting your time. After you've created your message, you've written the material that you want to write, you need to proofread it. You need to set it aside for a time. I find that's really the best way to proofread, unless you have a really tight deadline. Come back to it an hour later, after lunch, the next day. You need to set aside some time between when you wrote it and when you proofread it. I find that's an issue for me because I think my brain is really focused on the message I want to send, and my brain is so tied up with that, I don't really recognize what's on the page, which could be different than what I actually think is on the page. So you need to kind of disrupt things in your head and make sure you can really see what's on the page, because you may find mistakes. You may find words there that you didn't intend to put in on the page. Some techniques are reading out loud what you wrote, because it may not sound right, and if it doesn't sound right, you need to change it. As far as spelling is concerned, you could read the piece starting at the bottom and look at all the words starting from the bottom and kind of reading it backwards. I think that helps your brain kind of disrupt things and you focus more on the spelling instead of the message. And if you do a lot of writing, like I do, I get some help from a program called Grammarly. It's not perfect, but it definitely helps. So once again, proofreading is important because you want to pick up mistakes that are going to hurt your credibility and hurt the message that you want to send. Thank you for listening to the presentation. If you have any questions or comments or you need help with something, you can reach me at rodney@rodneywarner.net. You can give me a call at 267-393-4145. And I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.